Welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Albert Chiu. Lai Ching-te of Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party emerged victorious in 2024 presidential election, subsequently influenced by China. Nauru's severed its diplomatic relations with Taiwan, leaving Taiwan with only 12 allies. Meanwhile, Liu Jianchao, a member of China's foreign ministry, visited the United States and held a meeting with Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Liu is considered a potential candidate for China's next foreign minister. Joining us today are Huang Kwei-bo, National Chengchi University professor of diplomacy, and Michael Turton, Taipei Times columnist. A very warm welcome to both on the show.
Thank you.
Okay. The first question goes to Kwei-bo. Is that Nauru has recently chosen to cut diplomatic ties with Taiwan, marking another loss of an ally during President Tsai's tenure. This brings the total number of diplomatic allies who have severe relations during her administration to 9. So given the possibility of China further diminishing Taiwan's international allies to single digits or even less, it is crucial to consider Taiwan's response strategy. So as Lai Ching-te prepares to take office, what approach should be adopted towards China?
You know, it depends on what kind of nature of relationship Lai Ching-te is pursuing with mainland China. So if he is pursuing a more relatively amicable relationship with Beijing or more reconciliatory relations with Beijing, then I think he needs to find some mutually acceptable political foundation for cross-strait dialogue. You know, in the past, when Ma Ying-jeou was president, such a political foundation is called the 1992 consensus. I'm not saying that the 1992 consensus must be taken back by Lai. However, if he really likes to start or restart the communication channel with Beijing, then I think a political foundation for communication between Taipei and Beijing is very much necessary. However, with this dialogue channel or the effort to reestablish dialogue channel, Taipei, especially the new Lai Ching-te administration, needs to continue to reinforce its capability for deterrence. Because without necessary defense capabilities, will Taiwan be a tiger without teeth? Okay, if Lai Ching-te would like to pursue a so-called status quo relationship with Beijing, as it is in contemporary cross-strait relations, then I think Lai Ching-te at least needs to adopt a more self-restrained and less provocative approach to managing his relations with Xi Jinping or the Beijing authorities. But if Lai Ching-te doesn't care about that, and of course he can, use some confrontational approach to, his relations with mainland China. However, I do not think, that confrontational approach will be welcomed or, supported by Washington, not to mention by Beijing.
Michael, do you agree with Kwei-bo's analysis that William or Lai Ching-te's previous comments regarding the cross-strait has been very provocative and is the cause of things like we losing another ally like Nauru?
Well, I don't think after his election on Saturday that the PRC government called Nauru on Sunday and said, hey, can we cut relations on Monday? That's ridiculous. This has been happening for some time. And it's part of a broader PRC strategy in the Pacific to actually reduce Australia's influence. So it's important not to look at Nauru in the Taiwan context, but in the larger context of competition for the Pacific between, Nauru has basically been a client state of Australia. And China's pushing back against this. As far as Lai Ching-te's approach to Taiwan, everyone says, we need to talk to Xi Jinping, but no one ever says, what are we going to talk about, or what should we give up just to get a channel to talk to Xi Jinping? And I think that we're talking a lot about, we haven't really talked about why we should have talks at all. Everyone thinks talks are good without actually saying what's going to be said by whom and about what. So what Lai Ching-te should really be doing is enlarging and expanding the southbound policy, and especially with the Philippines, because the Philippines has shown how to deal with China's gray zone tactics. So if we're going to require preconditions for talks, that's one, the gray zone tactics and the overflights in our ADIZ need to stop. But if not, we should actually move closer to Philippines. A state visit would be great. And we should adopt their tactics of publicizing. Here's what China's doing. We got videos. Look at how they're behaving. This has been very effective for Philippines.
We want to talk to Xi Jinping. Kwei-bo mentioned 92 consensus. That's definitely the number one agenda that the CCP wants when there's ever a chance for President Lai to talk with President Xi. So what's your take on this? Do you think that 92 consensus can be reused as something new, or pretty much like still as a cliche if Lai Ching-te want to start a dialogue with President Xi?
Well, I don't think the public will accept it.
The public in Taiwan?
The public in Taiwan won't accept that at this point. I think a better idea might be to get the U.S. to broker or to work for talks, because right now the public will never accept making Taiwan part of China as a precondition for talks with Xi Jinping. So another way has to be found.
So what about you, Kwei-bo? Michael mentioned that the United States needs to be broker between the two political entities, Taiwan and the PRC, regarding maybe there's a consensus that both sides can reach upon. And also, on the other hand, President Biden, started to work the relationship with President Xi ever since their meeting in San Francisco last year. Would you say that the whole broad U.S. strategy to broker between the two sides is the good way to go?
In practice, someone could say that the U.S. is acting as a broker or mediator between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. However, officially, the U.S. government has said it will never act as a mediator between Taipei and Beijing. That has been stated in the so-called Six Assurances formally by President Ronald Reagan, and later stated in one of the resolution passed by the U.S. Congress. Therefore, I think it's good to have U.S. showing concern about this peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. But it's very difficult for Beijing to officially recognize the role of U.S. as a mediator in the Taiwan Strait.
Okay. All right, let's bring the conversation back to Nauru. Could you both discuss the context behind Nauru's choice to terminate its relations with Taiwan? Were there any prior indications of this decision? If Nauru isn't the final nation to make this move, but part of the broader Chinese initiative, which country might follow suit?
Well, the PRC has been attempting to pick off Pacific states for quite some time now. Nauru is just the latest one. At present, they're rushing resources into Bougainville, which is part of Papua New Guinea, and which they hope to, which is near the Solomons. And the Solomons sits across the communications between Australia and basically the United States. The internet cables go through there. So you can see areas, for example, like the Bashi Channel, like the Solomons, where the PRC shows a lot of interest because the cables are there. And it's also part of the PRC's move to secure resources, such as especially fish, right? And also shipping lanes. So Nauru has to be looked at as part of its competition with Australia for influence in the Pacific. And this has obviously been in the works for some time. Reuters just reported today that the PRC media had been there since May. So this is a possibility. Nauru is extremely poor. It's been strip mined for phosphates. The sovereign fund that they set up is basically bankrupt. Off the phosphate money 3 decades ago is basically all that money's gone now. So they need money.
Okay, Professor Kwei-bo, so what's your comments on this? Do you think that who is going to be the next if going to severe tie with ROC?
If I may go back a little bit to what you just discussed,
okay.
And I think Nauru not only needs money, but it needs money from all of the possible resources. Of course, Taiwan is part of the possible resources, but the PRC, not only the government itself, but also the state-owned companies, enterprises, have been able to bid from, say, the ADB, Asian Development Bank, or World Bank, in order to carry out some project construction or some basic construction projects in Nauru. Therefore, the role of mainland China has become more and more salient in terms of helping Nauru gain better economic momentum. Back to what country might be next. It's very difficult to predict. However, I think maybe one of the countries in the Central American and the Caribbean could be the one that has been targeted by the Beijing authorities. I don't want to name names. However, I think, to my best knowledge, one or two of those countries in that region could be the weakest link.
Right. Actually, Nauru said good thing about Taiwan in international organizations, as I still remember back in 2023, last year. But all of a sudden, because of switch of the parliamentary members and also the composition of the governments, leads up to this breakup decision with Taiwan. So that's kind of sad. What about the United States? What strategies might the U.S. employ to influence these hesitant allies in the Pacific, Central, and South America regions that are considering severing ties with Taiwan?
Well, one is money, and the other is flattery. The U.S. really needs to pay more diplomatic attention to what's going on out here, and further out to Cambodia. I mean, much of that has simply been ceded to China. At least sitting in Taipei, watching what's happening and traveling through those areas over the last decade. It's quite frightening how inactive the U.S. is. But the U.S. also has to help bring Australia in as well. It has to be a multilateral push.
Meanwhile, Liu Jianchao led a Chinese delegation to the U.S. He's the head of China's International Liaison Office. This visit, the highest level since last November's Xi-Biden San Francisco meeting, as I mentioned earlier, aims to acquaint the U.S. with Liu. He's likely to be China's next foreign minister, a move to prepare for his expected March appointments at the National People's Congress. Could you provide insight into Liu's background and his potential positions regarding cross-strait relations? Kwei-bo.
Liu is a very senior diplomat in the PRC, Minister of Foreign Affairs. He went in and out from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Beijing. But in recent years, I think his most important positions have been always with the party. But in the PRC, the party controls the state. So in the party, that doesn't say that he has no future. Liu Jianchao in 2018 served as Deputy Director of the CPC Central Committee's Office of Foreign Affairs Commission. In that exactly like that year, Liu Jianchao has been counted as being equivalent to the minister level official. Okay, that's 2018. In 2012, he was selected as a member of the CPC Central Committee. In the same year, he began to serve as the head of the International Department of the CPC. That is, the foreign minister of the Chinese Communist Party. However, equivalent to foreign minister of the party. However, Liu Jianchao has only served as 2 ambassadorships, one in Indonesia, another in the Philippines. I'm not saying that Liu Jianchao has no hope for, being nominated as foreign minister of the PRC. But, looking at his predecessors, starting from 1950s, I think, it's not very easy for this director or head of the International Department of CPC to become foreign minister. But I can give you 2 examples.
Okay.
One is Ji Pengfei, early, long years ago. He then became Minister of Foreign Affairs. And another is Dai Bingguo. Dai Bingguo didn't become foreign minister, but he became the vice chancellor in charge of foreign affairs. So maybe he got some brighter future as long as Xi Jinping counted his American visit this time as very much successful.
In his address in the U.S., Liu actually emphasized that Taiwan issue represents an ambiguous red line. like what I said, the wolf warrior approach. China attaches great importance to the U.S. declarations of non-support for Taiwan independence and anticipates that the U.S. will uphold its commitments. How do you interpret Liu's statements?
I think Liu Jianchao only reiterate what the Beijing authorities have been arguing for many decades. Regardless of a wolf warrior, diplomat or not, I think all PRC diplomats around the world would say, this is our firm red line, you cannot step on. And also they are going to say the future of China will see a reunification between the mainland and Taiwan. That's designated. So this has become, I would say, a firm belief among these PRC officials. So I do not feel surprised at hearing Liu Jianchao say that in Washington, D.C. I think most importantly is that Liu Jianchao brought this message to Washington in order to reconfirm the resolution of Xi Jinping in terms of opposing any attempt at whatever place for Taiwan independence.
But there's also some speculation saying that after the Xi Jinping and Biden meeting in San Francisco, the PRC or CCP start to kind of back down from this wolf warrior approach. Apparently, they reappoint several different government officials that's less aggressive toward the United States as opposed to before. So, Michael, so what's your take on this? Do you think there's a change in the near future, by the Biden administration that they might switch their attitude? Even though we saw that the CCP has taken away one of Taiwan's allies already, but what about on the other hand?
I don't think we'll see a change in anyone's position. That's one of the tragedies of Taiwan, I think. But Liu gave us boilerplate, and so the U.S. responded with its usual verbiage, the 6 assurances, and we don't support Taiwan independence, but we do support a peaceful resolution. So if the peaceful resolution is Taiwan independence, well, we won't object. I think that whole thing has to be clarified. But I think Liu's words show our problem in talking to Xi Jinping, right? If Taiwan wants to talk to Xi Jinping, what are they going to say back? They're going to say that. So what is there to talk about, really? All we'll be doing is negotiate in the terms of our surrender.
Okay, amidst the delicate phase of Taiwan's election, Xi Jinping dispatched Liu to lead a prominent delegation to the U.S. How should we interpret Xi Jinping's actions?
First of all, I think Xi Jinping sent Liu Jianchao to Washington, as I said just now, in order to show Xi Jinping's determination to deter any attempt at Taiwan independence. And secondly, I think Liu Jianchao, having, in such a reorganization of the diplomatic missions of the PRC, Liu Jianchao has become one of the key officials in the foreign affairs management structure of the PRC. So Liu Jianchao needs to be more exposed to this mainstream international society so that Liu Jianchao can receive even tougher training, quote-unquote training, to become really tough officials in the PRC Foreign Affairs Ministry. Not to mention, lastly, some reports have predict that Liu Jianchao will become the next foreign minister of the PRC. I don't know, because he's at his age of 60, so he still has a few years to wait. So we'll see, but I think the chance is there.
Well, that's one way to see it, but also another way is that this delegation to the U.S. is right after the Taiwan's election, the result comes out. So is it a signal sent to Biden that the PRC or the CCP wants to do something if the United States does not stick by the One China principle? And also, there's a chance for Lai Ching-te to claim or declare independence or somewhat move towards that way. Would you see that in that way?
No, I tend to prefer the domestic explanation that the professor here has just forwarded. But I think it's important the CCP keeps this pressure up on the United States, and the United States will then reiterate its one China policy, which is that Taiwan's status remains unresolved, and China is a state on the Asian mainland. And the two are engaging in a dance that we all have been watching for many years, and will probably go on for many years from now, hopefully.
Okay, Taiwan's Vice President Lai Ching-te and a former representative to the U.S., Liu Jianchao, are set to declare their inauguration as the new president and vice president of Taiwan on May 20th. Taiwanese scholars speculate that between China's National People's Congress and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference in early March and Taiwan's presidential inauguration on May 20th, Beijing may intensify its pressure on Taiwan. We've already witnessed Nauru severing ties with Taiwan. Could Beijing's actions be a distraction from its internal economic challenges? Maybe Michael, you can still go first.
I don't think they are. I think they're part of a larger strategy, which would be taking place whatever their economic situation was.
So, but in the long run, what is your assessment of this economic downturn in the domestic China will influence its strategy against Taiwan and also the United States?
Downturns on the mainland, of course, would hinder the performance of PRC's foreign policy programs. However, in the case of Nauru leaving the Republic of China, I better guess that this is one way for Xi Jinping or for the Beijing authorities to show off its power and influence over Taiwan in diplomacy. Mm-hmm. You can tell when Taiwan took office in May 2016, she has lost, as you said at the beginning, 10 diplomatic allies out of 22. So we used to have 22, now we had only 12. And that means Tsai Ing-wen and her administration failed to stop these diplomatic actions undertaken by Beijing. And another point I would like to make is that probably Nauru's leaving the Republic of China could serve as a warning message sent by Beijing. Mm-hmm. Warning what? Warning, of course, Lai Ching-te and his future government that Beijing can undertake some further actions against or countermeasures against Lai Ching-te's possible pro-independence approach, if there's any. And last possibility for Nauru's leaving the Republic of China is, Beijing would like to demonstrate its resolve to U.S. that Beijing will never tolerate any attempts of Taiwan independence. So Nauru is just one. But I have to add that I do not think getting Nauru is a way for Beijing to challenge the supremacy of the U.S. in the Pacific. It's against Taiwan, Lai Ching-te.
Okay, on the trade barriers issue, in the past year, Beijing conducted trade barrier investigations against Taiwan and imposed economic sanctions by suspending tariff concessions on some Economic Cooperation Framework Agreements or ECFA products to influence Taiwan's election results. So what action do you think Beijing might take before Lai Ching-te's inauguration? Besides economic and trade measures, does this include military threats, Michael?
It might include military threats. It will be more gray zone things like the sand dredging, the illegal sand dredging, illegal poaching, more ADIZ overflights. Balloons have been the thing since.
Right, that's one of them.
Yeah, that's a recent one. The really important stuff is the stuff we don't see, like when a Taiwan airline wants to get another gate at a European airport and China moves to block that. That's more important than Nauru. And Nauru is not aimed at Taiwan. Taiwan is a nice dividend. But the main thing is it's aimed at Australia, and it's not a coincidence that the PRC ambassador to Australia was speaking this week about how bad Australia is and how they need to mend their ways so they can become friends with the PRC. So, yeah, these things are going to continue happening. Once we had scores of countries recognizing us, and now we have 12, and that's not Tsai Ing-wen's fault. That's the inevitable result of Chiang Kai-shek's decision to pull out of the UN instead of working out a dual representation.
But I have to say that Ma Ying-jeou maintained the diplomatic status quo with 22 for many years. So I think there was a way to strike this diplomatic truce between Taipei and Beijing.
Kwei-bo, I'm still wondering, do you think that President Lai in the future, maybe at least in the first term, appear to adopt a less assertive stance on Taiwan's independence in his behavioral actions or speeches, you think?
All I can predict is till this coming November, when the U.S. is going to know who its new president will be, because the Biden administration appears to ask William Lai to be less provocative, to be more self-restrained, because the Biden administration is facing a very challenging presidential campaign against not only the Republicans, but Biden is facing some possible challenges from within. So Taiwan will be very much helpful if Taiwan can remain calm in cross-strait relations till this coming November. But beyond November, I don't know.
Okay, Michael and Kwei-bo, thank you for the great insights. President-elect Lai has not assumed office yet, but numerous challenges have already arisen, including Nauru's severance of ties, demanding his preparation. Taiwan's democracy has recently faced yet another test. While the Chinese Communist threat continues to escalate, the interactions among the US, China, and Taiwan warrant our ongoing scrutiny. Enjoy this episode. Leave us a message and subscribe to Taiwan Talks. Until next time.